Hey, welcome back to WAP Teacher Talk. Today we're going to start getting into content, and we're going to start with what I call lovingly Unit 0. So those of you who are new to WAP, basically until around 2019, AP World History covered everything. You had to start at 8000 BCE and go all the way up to today, and it was a nightmare. Then the College Board changed and had the class start in the year 1200. So there's a ton of really fun stuff that gets cut out. Greece, Rome, Persia, Qin and Han China. There's a lot of really amazing stuff that is not taught anymore. But what it does do is it allows AP teachers to go way more in depth about more modern history. So in general, I'm in favor of the switch, but this Unit 0 can be really problematic because there's a lot of stuff that students still need to know from before 1200 that now is not in the curriculum. So here's like what to do, right? A lot of teachers really struggle with this. And I guess you have to ask yourself a few questions, especially if you're new to your school. You need to ask, like, are you still required to cover all of world history, right? Some state standards say that I don't care if you're in AP World, they still need to learn about the entire history of the world. And in that case, you need to figure out like how to cover it in a way that's relatively quick so that then you can get to the tested content. A lot of schools just say whatever the College Board says, if it's an AP class, cover that. But again, you still want them to learn about Greece and Rome. You still want them to learn about the Han Dynasty in China. So another question you can ask is like, can you set it up at your school where the teacher before your class covers some of it? That's a lot harder to do at certain schools, I know, but especially if you're at a smaller school, you could talk to your, like, for example, freshman world geography teachers and see, like, is there a way that you could maybe start to include some of the like river valley civilizations and classical empires in your curriculum so that they at least have some basic knowledge of those early civilizations. And then the last thing is, does your school allow you to assign a summer project, right? You could maybe give, if so, you could give different students readings, not like a whole book, but you can give them different readings. You could give them like different videos, maybe crash course videos they have to watch that are on the early stuff. You could assign different kids different civilizations to look into in depth and then come and kind of present the first few weeks of school. So there are things that you can do to still cover that content, obviously not in as much depth as you maybe would in a non-AP class. Really what I do with Unit 0, so I do cover this stuff. Like my first 2 weeks of school, I cover Unit 0, stuff before 1200. The reason why I like it is because I like giving kids at least a few weeks to get a little bit settled before we're talking about content that could show up on the AP exam, right? It's kind of nice to give yourself that buffer where you can spend the first few weeks focusing on getting kids acclimated, learning kids' names, and teaching kids basic skills they're going to need to be successful in the course with content that's like important, but it's not going to show up in a DBQ in May. So I introduce kind of these main skills by talking about the content from before 1200. So basically, I think about key developments in the ancient, classical, early post-classical eras. And then I use that content to teach them how I want them to read the textbook and take notes. I have them take practice reading quizzes so they can see before it's for a grade, like, hey, by the way, when you read chapter 1 in your book, here's what the reading quiz will then look like. I show them some sample multiple choice questions, AP style, so they get an idea of what it looks like before it's on the first test. And I introduce them to the themes of the course. So for newer teachers to WAP, let me kind of give you a little bit more detail on that. So the main content for Unit 0, as far as I can tell, is the main world religions, right? They don't need to know all of the in-depth teachings of the religions, but you do want them to know, like, where did Hinduism start? What is the caste system? How is it different from Buddhism? Islam, Christianity, Confucianism. Confucianism, if nothing else, is like the one that pops up in world history the most. And for some teachers, that's already covered. So you might ask the class before, like, I come after my kids take world geography and cultures, so they've already covered the world religions, which is great. The other content that I think is really important is just foundational state building techniques. They don't need to know like how Rome was different than the Han Dynasty, but it is helpful for them to know how these different ancient kingdoms and classical empires used things like monumental art and architecture, a state religion, how they formed bureaucracies, that sort of thing, because then they'll notice those continuities. Because when we jump into the curriculum in the year 1200, there's going to be a lot of states and empires still using those same practices. And then lastly, the creation of those main trade routes, right? We want students to understand that the Silk Road doesn't magically appear in the year 1200. The Indian Ocean trade doesn't magically appear. That those were created during these like foundational eras and then are kind of continuing and growing and expanding in the late post-classical era. So for example, what I might do is I might have students, if I wasn't sure if they had learned about the world religions before, I might find just like a textbook chapter from another book, another world history book that goes over the different world religions. Ethel Wood has a really good one. It's just like a really straightforward chapter. I think it's chapter 4 in Ethel Wood's AP World History book that just goes through the main religions and like what you need to know for AP World History. So I might assign that to them. You could assign that as summer reading if you want and have them take notes however you want. Then you can see where they're starting from, right? Say, take notes however you would normally take notes in the textbook. Then you look at them and decide, okay, here's what I need to help them with. And you can walk them through some other practice activities to say, let's practice how I want you to take notes when it's for real, right? You also can have them create a SPICE T chart. That's like a thematic chart of common state building methods. So again, if you're new to the new AP World curriculum, basically there are 6 major themes in AP World, and these are super, super helpful. Like I also teach AP US history, and the themes, like they're fine, but it's not actually something that comes up a lot. In world history, the themes are so, so useful because you're going to have students learning about an entire civilization in like one day, and they need to figure out a way to organize their thoughts and compare. And so teaching students and getting students used to these themes early on is really important. So I call them the SPICE T themes. T-SPICE septic is a gross one, but whatever you want to do. So it's society, politics, interaction with the environment, culture, economy, technology. And if you get kids used to those themes, I have, for example, a SPICE T chart that has explanations. And I also have a blank template up on my website, antisocialstudies.org. So you can give it to the kids and just have them keep it in their binder all year, right? I have more detail on like what's included in society, what's included in culture, that sort of thing. But so you could have them maybe each look into a different civilization, the Roman Empire, the Han Dynasty, the Olmecs, whatever, and then just have them note major things that they did to kind of maintain power and build their state. So you might have the kid who looked into the Romans talking about aqueducts in interaction with the environment. And then you would have the kid who looked at the Qin Dynasty talking about the Great Wall. And we would say, oh, cool. Okay, so they're both building these massive infrastructure projects to kind of show their power and to like protect or provide for their empires. So again, they don't really need to know any of the differences or distinctions, but we just want them to get an idea of how earlier states were building their power and were maintaining their power, because again, those are going to continue, and it's going to provide really helpful context for kids when we just jump into the year 1200. If you want a little more detail, and you're like, I don't know, I'm new to this course, or I've always spent a whole semester teaching this, which is how I was, and you want a little more detail, I have a video here on my YouTube channel that's 20 minutes long where I basically lecture all of that stuff. I go through like all the stuff that I want my kids to know about Unit 0. It's 20 minutes. It covers like the Neolithic Revolution, main religions, state building techniques. So if you really don't have time, you can just assign them this video. There is like a viewing worksheet that's pretty basic that's on my website, antisocialstudies.org, with a key for you. You can just assign this to them and say, I need you to watch it. We're going to discuss it, and then we're going to move on with our lives. That's totally fine too. So I hope that's helpful about Unit 0, whether you have to spend a month on it or 1 or 2 weeks. There's a lot of good stuff that you can include there. And it's just a good way to get kids like engaged in the class in a way that's low stakes. You're not having to test them AP style just yet. So if this was helpful, just a reminder, these are a lot of ways you can support anti-social studies. Please make sure you're subscribed and you're following me on Instagram. And if you really appreciate what I'm doing, then please join my Patreon community. The link is just down in the description. Thanks. Bye.